I discovered 3 terrifying caving experiences that led to unexplained disappearances. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill ran down my spine. I was just a regular guy, you know. Living my life, working my job, going through the motions. But that evening, everything changed. That I was scrolling through my phone, probably looking at memes or something. The world outside was dim. The sun had disappeared behind a curtain of thick clouds. I was cozy, wrapped in my blanket, when I stumbled upon an article about caving. Intrigued, I read on. 3 disappearances. 3 caves. 3 chilling stories. My heart raced. The first cave was the Cave of Whispers. They said if you stood in the darkness long enough, you could hear the voices of those who never returned. The thought made my skin crawl. Just the idea of moving through that oppressive dark, the whispers wrapping around me like chilling tendrils. What did those voices say? Were they warnings? Pleas for help? My imagination painted a horrifying picture. Then there was the Blackstone Cave, famous for its shifting walls. Once you entered, the layout changed. People went in, but they weren't always able to find their way out. The thought of being trapped, lost in a dark labyrinth of stone, made my chest tighten. The walls could close in on you, could trap you, could suffocate you. I gulped hard at that image, and the final one, a cave known as the Echo Hollow. It was infamous for giving its adventurers a taste of madness. Swallowed up by darkness, explorers claimed to hear not just echoes of their own voices but laughter. Murmurs of family and friends turned twisted, taunting them. They would emerge, but something inside them would be gone forever. I shivered. Could I ever get that laughter out of my head? The tension grew thicker as I read on. Objects began to shift in my room. The wind howled outside. I could hear it against the walls, a creature trying to get in. I felt a presence. It brushed against my shoulder. Just a draft? Or was it something more? Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the silence. My heart stopped. I glanced at the door. Was it just my imagination? Or had I disturbed something I shouldn't have? The anxiety invaded my thoughts, a creeping dread that gnawed at my sanity. What if I was next? What if that door held more than just a passage to another room? I took a step back. But just as I did, the shadows moved. A figure loomed in the doorway, and I froze. Was it real? Or had I finally lost my mind? A shiver ran down my spine, and I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound escaped. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure lingered for a heartbeat, shrouded in darkness. Its outline, a grotesque amalgamation of shadows, seemed to twist and undulate as if it were almost alive. The air around me charged with a raw, suffocating energy, making it hard to breathe. My instincts screamed at me to flee, to run, to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever this was. But my body stood rooted, paralyzed by a horror that eclipsed all rational thought. Then, the shadows parted slightly, revealing a face, or at least a semblance of one. Its features shifted as if caught in a perpetual state of flux, merging from one horrifying visage to another, a sunken-eyed wanderer, an anguished scream, then haunting laughter that sent jolts of ice down my spine. It began to whisper words indistinct yet laced with despair, curling around my mind like creeping vines. Was it the voice of a lost soul? One of the missing? Just as I summoned the strength to bolt, the room darkened further. The figure stepped fully into the light, but instead of defining details, I was met with a gaping maw where its face should have been. A profound emptiness beckoned, meckled and alluring. My heart thundered in my chest, matched only by the irregular tap-tap-tap of something against the window, perhaps a signal, or maybe a warning. I took a trembling step back, and that's when I heard it, a faint echo, distant yet pricking at my consciousness. It was laughter, playful and taunting yet chillingly familiar. My own laugh. The last time I remembered laughing felt forever ago, buried under cascading layers of dread and mundane routine. It was an endearing memory twisted into something grotesque, the punchline of a joke I never understood. Suddenly, the world seemed to tilt on its axis, shadows surged from every corner of the room, darting like living creatures drawn to the entity that enthralled me. They twisted and blended into the figure, becoming a grotesque ensemble of limbs and whispers. I could feel the voices, each utterance slicing through my sanity, eroding the thin veneer of normalcy I clung to. In a desperate attempt to ward off the impending darkness, I stumbled backward, straight into the threshold of my Hamami sanctuary. But the moment I touched the door's cool surface, an electric shock raced up my arm. The whispers intensified, a harmonious orchestra of despair. Every spirit who had vanished into the caves now seemed to be merging together in that room, urging me to join their ranks. I gulped, choking on my fear, the decision heavy on my shoulders. One step forward was embracing the unknown, one step back meant retreating into a madness that would undoubtedly consume me. The walls around me warped, a sickening groan resonating from the very structure of my home, and then, as if answering my unspoken question, the figure lunged forward. The shadows enveloped me, pulling me into their cold embrace. I gasped as my feet left the ground, suspended in disbelief. The taste of iron flooded my mouth, my heart racing as the entity and I merged into one dark collision of thoughts and screams. In that moment, clarity hit unlike anything I had ever felt. I saw the cave. The cave of whispers. I heard the voices, clearer and more distinct than before, not just inside my mind, but echoing through the very fabric of reality. They weren't warnings, they were invitations. Roaring with fury, the winds outside shrieked, and I realized I was teetering on the brink of total descent. Then, amidst the chaos, my phone buzzed violently against the floor. The screen shattered like the remnants of my calm, revealing untouched notifications flooding in each one a plea, an anguished call begging for help. My blood ran cold when I saw the sender's name. It was me. The last glimmers of my spirit were consumed by a darkness that promised no return. As reality dissolved into a cacophony of laughter and whispers, I felt myself being pulled towards the door that led nowhere, a door I had unwittingly opened. And just as it felt like I might slip away forever, a voice broke through the madness, jagged and guttural, echoing a single terrifying truth: "Welcome home." The whispers crescendoed, and in the final moment before everything went black, I could sense the feeling of countless others waiting behind the door, behind the shadows, ready to greet me with open arms. A suffocating silence settled thickly in the aftermath of the shadow swallowing me whole. In that void, I was suspended not quite within my own body, yet not devoid of its physical agony. A pervasive chill wrapped around my form like a tomb, imbued with both terror and a startling sense of calm. Time felt amorphous, as if I were floating on a distorted plane, where moments blended into one another without discernible structure. Then came the pull, a lingering tug at my consciousness as I drifted through layers of darkened space. Wisps of memories danced fleetingly before me, each one a halo flickering in an abyss. They were snapshots of faces, loved ones, neighbors, people who had vanished from their lives, swallowed by the myth of the cave of whispers. Universes etched in fleeting laughter, embers of joy now quenched and twisted into mournful echoes. I felt their desolation, felt their longing for release, stitched into the fabric of this malevolent reality. Suddenly, sharp pain lanced through the void, an excruciating reminder of flesh and blood. Unseen forces began to shake me, each tremor sending waves of icy dread spiraling through my core. As if a million hands clawed at me from the beyond, I became aware of the whispers converging into frantic crescendos, forming a mantra that resonated with my soul: "Join us, join us, join us." A frantic realization flooded through the din. The figures that haunted these murky depths were drawn not by hatred but by an insatiable hunger for companionship, an existence suspended between two realms, eternally yearning. They wanted me, desired my essence, body and soul, to quench the hollowness that consumed them. With a jolt, I was thrust into a realm no longer constrained by dimensions. Ethel's kitchen erupted around me, not the sunlit haven I remembered, but a warped tableau of my life, a mockery of home. The walls were dripping black, breathing like a living creature. The familiar scent of freshly baked bread had soured into a fetid stench of decay. The counter, once cluttered with relics of ordinary moments, was now a morbid display of photographs, each one capturing the expressions of those who had disappeared into the cave that I stumbled toward the photos, desperation clawing at my insides. There they were, familiar faces twisted and contorted in agonizing rapture, their mouths open wide not in smiles but silent screams, a cacophony of terror captured forever in time. Among them, I spotted my own face, staring back with wide eyes that begged for understanding, for release. Suddenly, the air shifted. The malevolent presence that had entwined with me recoiled slightly, as though anticipating something monstrous. I turned, heart thundering like a drum, to see swirling shadows gather at the doorway, figures emerging one after the other, their forms grotesquely shifting, faces leaking an array of emotions stark against the void: desperation, hopelessness, twisted ecstasy. They reached for me, begging, pleading, channeling all their longing into an infernal symphony of wails that echoed off the warped walls. "Help us!" they whispered, and their voices melded into a hypnotic cacophony that wrapped around me like a suffocating embrace. I found my own lips parted, a sound tearing through the tumult, but instead of screams or protests, I was drawn to their plight. "Help us!" Out of the darkness, a perverse clarity washed over me. It bubbled, suffocating and sweet, compelling yet revolting. I understood their call, their needs. Guilt washed over me as I feared I too would become a prisoner of their despair. But just as realization washed over me, another grating shout pierced through the shadows, as familiar as my own, someone calling my name, a desperate plea that broke the hazy chains binding me. "Over here. Please. This way." The raw intensity of it caused the shadows to writhe in frustration, swirling into a frenzy as they sensed a threat to their hunger. That I spun around to see my sister, Claire, emerging from the corners of the warped kitchen, her eyes wide with terror, yet illuminated with determination. The moment I locked eyes with her, the shadows recoiled as if stung, pulling back momentarily to hiss in discontent, their claims over me disrupted. "Run. You have to." Claire's voice was fierce and anguished, but before she could finish, the shadows surged, a tide of darkness that slapped against her frame, pushing her back. The moment stretched into infinity as I reached for her, desperate to bridge the gap. Then, the world erupted into chaos. The air split with a deafening crack as the shadows enveloped the space around us. They roared, thrashing violently, and in that tumult, I glimpsed something horrible: the shifting forms of lost souls intermingled with the shadows, their faces contorted with rage and despair, now empowered by the agonizing struggle. The energy in the room swelled, and I felt tendrils of darkness clawing at my mind, whispering again their insidious promises. With a primal scream, I lunged forward. But just before I could make contact with Claire, the amalgamation of shadows erupted, snatching her from my reach, dragging her back into the darkness like a cruel tide pulling at a drowning swimmer. No. I screamed. The darkness shrieked back, mocking my defiance, the shadows now swirling in a tempest around me. Claire's anguished cries echoed dimly, straining against the burgeoning chorus of lost souls. I could barely discern her gasp as she vanished into the void, her fate sealed, ravaged by ravaging tenebrous arms. And then I felt yet a new presence, emerging from the shadows, that vile amalgamation of life and death. It loomed before me, a fusion of all I had witnessed, its face unrecognizable yet so achingly familiar. Within its maw, chaos roared, and through the din, a single thought crystallized: this was my decision, and I stood at the precipice of an unforgiving choice: join us or lose her forever. The shadows pulsed around me, the weight of countless souls pressing down, demanding acceptance. I trembled, unprepared for the decision that lay ahead, torn between the darkness that called me and the fleeting hope that remained just out of reach. And as I stood there, on the brink of annihilation, I grasped the truth that sobered me to my core: my fate was interlinked with theirs. But would I embrace the shadows or risk everything for the precious remnants of light? Before I could decide, the ground shook violently beneath my feet, the room spiraling into endless darkness. I faltered, slipping into the abyss, and all I could hear was that haunting laughter, echoing relentlessly as a chasm opened below. Then, the darkness whispered again, sweeter this time, as if coaxing me toward a final resolution, "Welcome home," and then there was nothing. I awoke, if such a term could describe my current state, in yet another twisted version of the kitchen, the space now pulsing with sickly hues of green and violet. A low, throbbing noise echoed around me, an unsettling rhythm, as if the very walls were breathing in sync with something deep below, something primal and ancient. I stumbled to my feet, the mottled floor sticky and warm beneath me, and braced myself against the counter. The once dependable wood now slick and viscous. Voices floated through the air, not whispers anymore, but panicked phrases woven into 1,000 different tones. "You mustn't listen," one voice begged, while another cried, "Join us." The air felt alive, as though the darkness had developed sinew and muscle, weaving through my thoughts, wrapping itself around my memories. "Claire!" I screamed, my own voice cracking against the oppressive silence that followed. The shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, teasing, taunting, relentless in their presence. As I stood there, breathing heavily, a reflection caught my eye in the surface of the counter. I needed to face it. Did I exist in this twisted realm as a specter, as they did? I hastily glanced down and froze. The reflection showed not my own tired face, but instead a writhing mass of eyes and mouths, all murmuring at once in a cacophony of sorrow that rang through me like a bell. My heart raced as I stumbled back, horrified. With every moment I lingered, it felt as if the reflection sought to draw me in, promising access to secrets long buried within the cave of whispers. I felt the edges of sanity fray around me, the fear coiling like a snake around my throat. "Enough!" I shouted, and flung open the kitchen door, releasing a cloud of shadowed whispers that swept over me like a phantasmagoric fog. I stepped into a passage, grotesquely warped and lined with broken doors, each one cracked as though something behind them was eternally trying to escape. The path was dimly lit, illuminated irregularly by flickers of light that spat from the walls like electric sparks of cruel mischief. With every breath, I inhaled the smell of burnt despair. As I moved down the corridor, the walls seemed to pulse along with the rhythmic throbbing that had enveloped the space. I pressed on, further into the bowels of this nightmarish reality, swallowing dread with every step. The very fabric of this haunted place pressed against me, whispering indecipherably. The memories of Claire flooded through my mind, her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled with mischief, how she would braid my hair on lazy afternoons. I had to find her, had to wrench her from the clutches of whatever malevolent force had captured us both. Suddenly, the passage opened up into a vast chamber, echoing with torment. Shadows writhed openly here, a congregation of lost souls twisting through the air like tendrils of smoke, their faces contorted in agony. I stumbled back, my heart thundering, recognizing familiar forms among the tormented. The faces of neighbors, friends, a kaleidoscope of my life swirling grotesquely, their mouths pulling back into screams that didn't quite resonate audibly, as if they were caught in a space beyond sound. "Help us!" They cried silently, their eyes pleading as they swirled closer to me, the longing palpable. I was tethered, a marionette strung along by their desperate refrains. And then, there she was at the center, Claire, her face a sharp beacon in the suffocating gloom, mere feet away from me yet fundamentally unreachable. "Claire!" I screamed, flinging myself toward her, driven by instinct. Her gaze met mine, confusion replacing the once familiar recognition, as if she struggled against some unseen force binding her. I reached out, our fingers almost touched the moment suspended, heavy with unspent words, but the shadows surged. A wave of darkness rolled from the chamber's core like a tsunami, wrapping around me, pulling at my limbs, threatening to drag me back into despair. I shouted her name, desperation fueling my attempt to break free from the encroaching grip, but the shadows coiled tighter. "Let her go!" I roared, fighting against the pull that threatened to siphon the very essence from my being. It felt futile, the tenebrous arms reaching greedily, feeding on my struggle. And then, just above the roaring tide, a different sound broke through the frenetic whisper of a storm coming together, a deep rumble of something monstrous soon to be unleashed. "Join us," whispered the amalgamation of lost souls as they echoed my name, their voices swelling to a furious crescendo. The energy twisted around me, pressing forward, leaving me gasping for air. I felt my resolve begin to fray under the weight of their collective despair. A decision loomed, one that would either forge my connection to the darkness or sever the bond one held to Claire, and then, with piercing clarity, I saw a portal opening behind Claire, a writhing maw of shadow, beckoning her into its inky depths. "Come back!" I screamed, but all she could do was look at me with those tortured eyes, fighting against the gravitational pull of the void. As she took a staggering step away from the light, my heartbeat rattled against my ribs, something within me cracked. I realized, in that moment, I had to choose, succumb to the darkness that wished to engulf me, or risk everything to pull us both from the brink. But before I could act, the ground beneath me exploded in a desperate surge of force, yanking me backward, and I heard Claire's voice wailing, fading into the void. "Help!" The darkness swelled, pulling me toward the abyss as I clawed at the air, desperate to reach her. With a final glance into her anguished face caught in the flickering light, I screamed one last time, feeling the tendrils of despair wrap around me like a lover's embrace, and then nothing. As the world fell silent, one question echoed in the space where hope once thrived: would I follow her into the darkness, or would I remain trapped in this merciless nightmare, both of us lost forever? I fell, and the ceaseless nothingness swallowed me. Air turned to darkness, and the floor crumbled beneath me like old paper. I tried to scream, my voice lost somewhere in the void as textures shifted, solid to liquid, punctuated by moments of light blinking on and off like a faulty bulb. Then, a sudden jolt rebounded through my body. I landed on something softer than the surface of this hellscape, a fetid mass that pulsated beneath my weight. The tumbling sensation faded, leaving me sprawled on a floor of what felt like flesh, heartbeat reverberating under my palms as I tried to steady myself. Panic surged again, but the echoes of Claire's fading cry stabbed into my heart, anchoring my resolve. I pushed myself up, the darkness almost tangible, stirring like thick smoke. Flickers of light illuminated the depths, revealing fragments of twisted bodies entwined in strange postures, eyes wide and mindlessly staring at something unseen. Faces I almost recognized twisted in forever-etched horror. I dared not touch them, searing dread gripped me at the thought of their suffering becoming mine. Suddenly, I heard a faint whimper, cutting through the thick silence. It crawled beneath my skin, a promise of salvation, or perhaps a trap. Churning dread confronted hope, battling within me. I turned blindly towards the source of the sound, driven by desperation. "Claire!" I whimpered, the word barely managing to escape my lips. Through the suffocating fog came a flicker of light ahead, weak yet persistent, pulling me forward like a moth to a flame. I stumbled toward it, heart racing, fighting against the clinging grasp of despair. Each step resonated in this nightmare landscape, as if I were awakening something slumbering beneath, something hungry, something ancient. As I neared the light, its brilliance expanded, revealing a vast cavern, the walls slick with something black and viscous that reflected no light of its own. Glowing mushrooms crept along the base rock, pulsating in time with the now familiar rhythm that thrummed in my bones. My pulse quickened, shadows danced around the edges, flickering familiar faces just beyond the fringes of perception. Helped the voice tremored through me, layered in pain and longing. It could have been my own voice, laced with Claire's essence. My heart clenched painfully in recognition, but clarity swelled in the cacophony. This wasn't merely a sound, it was a symphony of despair, and yet there was something more. As I veered closer to the center, other tormented wails, distinct and desperate, clawed at my sanity. The light broke upon a scene more horrific than any visage I could conjure. A massive altar pulsated at the heart of the cavern, a dark mass coalescing above it, forcing me to squint through the terrors that obstructed my vision. The altar was formed from twisted remnants of lost souls, their faces grotesquely fused into one another, like a collective scream solidified into a physical form. Swollen hands poked out as if they yearned for salvation, fingers curling against the air around them. And above, suspended in the thick, agonizing gloom, Claire hung in tormented disbelief, her body enveloped in shadow, her mouth moving soundlessly as the darkness bore down upon her. "Claire!" I shouted, tumbling forward, but the shadows slammed against me, denying my advance. I watched helplessly as tendrils of darkness snaked towards her, looking to pull her deeper into the horrific amalgam above the altar. The voices of the lost crescendoed, filling the air with a symphony of anguish and despair. "Join us!" they intoned together, their words striking at my heart. But there was something else in the undercurrents, a whisper I couldn't decipher, almost an invitation. The shadows pressed down upon me, thickening, suffocating, giving the illusion that they could somehow grant me what I desired if I surrendered. No. I screamed, fighting against the tide that sought to claim me. My vision blurred, and for a moment, the shadows internalized, giving way to blinding memories. Alone moments of Claire, a secret smile, a shared glance, laughter echoing on warm summer nights. I couldn't let her go. Yet, the voice of the shadows began to tease and taunt in a sonorous chorus, shifting from pleas to promises, casting doubt upon my resolve. You could join her. Remember the cave of whispers. You know her fate. End your fight. No. My voice rang out, breaking through the fog of their lies, but doubt clawed at me. I faltered, breath hitching as I turned back toward the altar, desperate. Claire's face locked onto mine, eyes filling with terror that twisted my soul into knots. Above the altar, the mass of shadow slithered, taking on grotesque forms, shadows of nightmares long forgotten coalescing with each pulse. I had to find a way to her, had to breach this cursed darkness to pull her back from the brink of oblivion. With a deep breath, I willed forth every ounce of courage and lunged toward her, my entire being awakening with determination. If I failed, we would both be lost. The shadows surged around me, clawing, reaching, whispering curses that echoed within my very bones, and as I extended my hand, feeling her warmth so close yet so impossibly far, a blinding light erupted. Together, we could fight this terror, but as I reached for her, the shadows recoiled suddenly, a guttural roar filling the chamber, and the ground rippled beneath us. A crack tore through the altar, splitting it open as something ancient and monstrous thrummed back to life, feeding off our desperation, and I realized this was only the beginning. Claire! I screamed as the abyss yawned wide, pulling both of us toward an eldritch fate, my heart pounding in terror at the realization that the cavern itself was awakening, ready to claim its next victims. What twisting horrors lay in wait as darkness obscured my vision? Just then, Claire's terrified gaze captured mine one last time, and the cavern rumbled ominously as I felt our connection wane, our fingers slipping away. And then, with a spine-tingling crack of thunder, everything shattered. The darkness shifted in swirling currents, and for a moment, time lost its meaning. I tried in vain to reach for Claire as the ground trembled beneath me, the altar splitting as if it were alive, strings of sinew-like veins writhing through the crevices like angry serpents. Above, the mass of shadow parted, revealing an expanse that felt alive watching, waiting. As I sank into the churning darkness, I felt a crushing weight pressing down on me, threatening to rip me apart. My breath quickened, vision narrowing as I twisted and screamed, fighting against the unseen hands clawing at my body. I could feel the cavern molding around me, its flesh-like walls pulsing with a life of their own, a grotesque organism thriving on the torment woven deep within its bowels. Her desperate face haunted me, and I forced myself to concentrate. I had to remember how we had arrived in this living nightmare. The trek through the wooded hills that morning seemed like a forgotten dream. Claire's laughter had echoed through the trees before life twisted into this saturated horror. I cursed the darkness for tearing us apart. No matter how many times it concealed me in its shroud, I would not relent. Suddenly, a piercing wail exploded from the shadows, a sound that felt as though it dragged my very soul through the depths of despair. I was no longer alone. Figures emerged, interlaced with the darkness, their faces twisted in expressions of eternal anguish, mouths open but silent, begging for mercy with eyes that burned into mine. I stumbled back, heart pounding, grappling with the instinctual fear racing through my veins. In the distance, I caught sight of a faint flicker like starlight caught in a web of night. With each step toward it, more lost souls fell into the vortex of despair swirling around me, their cries rising in a cacophony that sank hooks of dread into my heart. Their haunting visages melded together, forming a gallery of forgotten memories, faces resembling those interred in my mind, friends, family, everyone claiming this space of purgatory as their own. The flicker grew brighter, illuminating a pathway through the grotesqueries that rose before me. And yet, it felt deceptively welcoming, a snare laced with curiosity luring me deeper into this abysmal bowels. I hesitated, grappling with the gnawing instinct to run away, but I could not abandon Claire to whatever malevolence churned within these cavernous walls. Thina heartbeat, stronger than the pulsing around me, resonated beneath my feet. It emanated deep from the cavern, commanding attention. Each undulation felt primal, pulling at my cords of fear and desire as if calling me into itself. Come, come, the voices lulled in a hypnotic darkness, flickering between promises of reunion and damnation. Ignoring the cacophony, my feet reluctantly moved forward, each step a battle against the freezing whirlpool of despair. The flickering light transformed into a tunnel carved from shadow and marble, veins of light pulsating against the inky darkness. The closer I got, the more I felt a presence at my back, like an unseen predator eager to claim me. Remembering Claire, I pressed on, heart racing with determination, hoping she could feel my presence, too. But suddenly, the flicker dimmed, swallowed whole by a shadow that erupted from the walls, coiling around my ankles with icy tendrils. The darker mass began to rise, solidifying into a tower of broken faces, eyes alight with a terror I could only fathom in nightmares. They reached out to me, grasping for hope while pulling me into their suffocating fold. Join us, they whispered, voices melding into one, wrapping around my senses like heavy fog. Motion blurred, and panic surged as I fought against the tide, clawing my way backward, struggling to break free. Shadows clawed at my sides, wrapping around me, urging me downward, toward the altar where figures writhed together in an unspeakable agony that I could no longer tell where the flicker of light had gone. It was lost somewhere beneath the throbbing mass of horror now looming over me. I was becoming part of the amalgamation, its tendrils sinking into my skin like thorns, embedding me into the tapestry of lost souls. I gasped, choking on fear, desperate for clarity among the chaos, but the shadows only danced around me, ensnaring me deeper into their web of despair. Then, the scenery around me shifted again, abruptly transforming into Claire's agonized face as she fought against the shadowy grasp above her. "Stephen! Please!" She screamed, but her voice was now tangled within the symphony of cries, resonating with twice the despair. It twisted inside me, squeezing my heart until I thought I would burst, this torment echoing into the darker resonance that called to all the lost souls fluttering just beyond the threshold of my vision. Help! Help us! They called, thousands of mirrors reflecting her plea, rippling through the void. I felt every gaze piercing through the mask of shadows, watching, yearning to escape with an urgency that nearly uprooted my sanity. Then, from the altar, the ground directly in front of me began to tremble, and a grotesque limb shot forth, clawing toward the flicker of light I'd been drawn to. It twisted and contorted into something unearthly, grotesque shapes rising from the flesh beneath, ready to rend what remained of my will to resist. My heart seized, and in that very split second, I understood the true horror of what lurked below. The last part of my resolve melted as I screamed, "No! Not again!" My voice drowned in an ocean of wails. I could not save Claire, could only succumb to the shadows growing closer, swallowing the last chamber of air in what had become a cacophony of despair and madness. And just as I fell into the dark arms of oblivion, I felt a sharp tug on my shoulder, a hand reaching out, not from the depths of shadow, but from the light. "Fight, Stephen, fight!" It screamed as it yanked me back from the precipice. But what I faced now was no savior. The face twisted, revealing a grinning horror twisted from my own terror, and the chamber quaked with its laughter as it prepared to unveil its true form. That I gripped desperately onto the fading flicker of light, knowing there was no escape from the horrors waiting to claim me. Then it whispered, "Welcome home." The shadows throbbed, pulsating with a dark rhythm that seemed to mock my plight. The twisted figure before me, an abomination born from desperation, exuded a sickeningly sweet scent that hung in the air like rotten flesh. Its laughter echoed, a cacophonous hymn that wormed its way into my ears, pulling every shadow in the cavern closer. My heart raced, each beat a countdown as I struggled against the unseen forces trying to drag me down. "Fight it!" The hand gripped my shoulder tighter, but the terror emanating from the figure numbed my thoughts, warping reality into a grotesque parody of what I had known. My eyes darted back to Claire, her terrified gaze trapped beneath layers of agonizing despair. The dark figure before me stretched its maw wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth as insatiable eyes locked onto mine, hungry for oblivion. The cavern shuddered, and the walls closed in around me, threatening to crush both my body and soul. I could feel the weight of lost lives pressing against Methos who had come here seeking adventure, only to find their end in the pit of horrors. I envisioned their faces, dissolving into nothingness, just as their screams mingled with my own heart-wrenching cries for Claire. This was their purgatory, and I was swimming through their collective anguish. "Stephen, please." Claire's voice ricocheted through the chamber, but it faded, turning into one long, tortured moan that filled me with helplessness. I was losing her, losing myself. With a surge of adrenaline, I pulled away from the grip of the figure's laughter, forcing myself to focus on the flicker of light that seemed impossibly far away. I had to reach Ithad to escape this living nightmare that I stumbled backward, navigating through the writhing shadows that lashed out like serpents, hungry for my flesh. The figure lunged, its inky fingers extend as I darted sideways, my back slamming into the pulsing wall of flesh. I clawed at it, pulling myself free, even as whispers coiled around me like smoke, dragging me backward into the suffocating clutches of despair. Join us, the wails crescendoed, weaving together a tapestry of sorrow that wrapped around my body like chains. I could see lost souls, their faces distorted in agony, reaching out for me as they writhed hopelessly, sealing their fate. I had become just another morsel for the dark's appetite that I in the distance. I glimpsed another figure form within the Shadowsa silhouette that flickered and danced, revealing edges that were eerily familiar. My breath caught. It couldn't be. It approached, sketching out the contours of a face, a form that had once filled my memories with warmth. But here, it exuded a cold fire, a glow that beckoned and twisted into something pixelated. The essence of Claire, twisted by despair begetting more despair. That I in that moment, I realized, this wasn't just a fight for me, it was a battle for her soul. "Claire!" I screamed, and the very cavern echoed my desperation, amplifying it into an unholy choir of longing and despair. The figure paused, its eyes momentarily narrowing in recognition, and I seized the instant. With a desperate push, I launched towards the flickering light, willing it into a beacon, praying it could guide us home. What if the light betrays us? A voice horrifically familiar hissed from the shadows, wrapping its presence around my neck like a vice. As I reached for the flicker, tendrils unfurled from the darkness, wrapping tightly around my limbs as the floor quaked beneath me. I gasped for breath, pulling Claire's specter toward me. "Please, I won't let you go," I cried as I felt her slender fingers graze mine, her warmth seeping through. But suddenly, the shadows surged, dragging us apart with fierce intensity. Claire's anguished eyes widened, her form dissipating back into an amorphous mist. I was fighting against an unseen current, the darkness screeching with collective rage as it marked me as one of its own. Do you not realize? The twisted figure hissed, its voice slithering through my resolve like a broken promise. You cannot escape what you are a vessel for the tormented. The darkness craves you, craves your pain. Welcome home. The word struck deep, mingling with the suffocating terror spiraling within me. A frantic surge propelling me toward the flickering light, which had now began to dim perilously, coaxing me to plunge into the obscurity from which I had fought so hard to escape. For every ounce of hope I clung to was being stripped away, the shadows whispering sweet lullabies of inevitability. Then, just before I plunged into the nothingness, I saw something shift in the light, something I hadn't recognized until now. A reflection, cropped and clouded by shadows, the outline of a doorway pulling open, yawning like a gaping mouth, the warmth spilling out like a siren song. "Claire!" I shouted one last time before my body jerked forward. The darkness collapsed around me, ready to devour what little was left of my shattered spirit. The doorway loomed, pulsing with a life of its own, offering both escape and betrayal, a colossal choice in a grotesque game of fate. Just as I grazed the edge, a hand shot through the clearing. It didn't belong to Claire, nor to the dark figure, it was a remnant of my own self, laughing at my desperation, dragging me back into the maw of eternal night. "Welcome home," it whispered once more, as the grip of oblivion tightened, leaving me with the chilling certainty that what lay beyond the light was a fate more horrifying than any imaginably, fate waiting eagerly to ensnare me. And with that, Before I could utter another plea, the echoes of 1,000 morning shadows reverberated through my soul, and all that remained was darkness swallowing the last remnants of my hope. The darkness enveloped me like a second skin, heavy and inescapable. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was the very essence of despair, a thick, suffocating entity that pressed against my lungs, suffocating any thoughts of liberation. My heart pounded, thrumming against my ribcage in a frantic rhythm that sounded a harsh counterpoint to the eerie silence that had reclaimed the cavern. It felt as though the darkness was listening, waiting, biding its time for my next move. I stumbled forward, blinded by the void, each footstep a reminder of the shadows coiling around my ankles, whispering sweet nothings that settled like lead in my mind. As I walked, I felt a chanhea chill in the air that was not simply a byproduct of fear, but something tangibly malevolent. It slithered up my spine, a warning that whatever had taken Claire was now searching for me. "Help us," a voice wailed from the abyss, one I recognized but dared not acknowledge. Memories of laughter and light twisted into grim specters, and I found myself yearning for Claire once more. I turned, desperate for those familiar brown eyes, hoping against hope they'd somehow found the strength to look back. Instead, I was greeted by a glimmer and ethereal shimmer that danced before me like a lost memory that I reached out, my fingers grazing the cool surface as it flickered in and out of view. "Claire." I breathed, trembling with anticipation and dread. The shimmer pulsed at my touch, a beacon in this oppressive landscape. Anxiety choked me as I forced myself to keep calm, knowing that if I panicked, I risked losing the fragile connection between us. Yet even as I gazed into the distorted reflection, I sensed movement in the shadows, figures emerging, phantoms bound to the remnants of this cursed place. Their forms were blurred, faces contorted in agony, but I could almost make out expressions of recognition flickering within their depths. I took a step back, swallowed hard. Their wails grew louder, twisting into an anguished symphony that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. "Join us, Stephen," they shrieked, hands reaching out, desperate to pull me into their fold. "Together, we can escape this suffering." "No," I shouted, recoiling from their grasp. I felt the pull of the abyss fighting against my resolve, a cry of anguish rumbling through the cavern as the shadows intensified their assault. They knew that isolation was the greatest fear, one that spun around me, writhing, twisting, until it gnawed at my sanity. "What happens to you, happens to her," the foul voice of the shadow figure sneered across the void, slithering like the smoke that enveloped my mind. Suddenly, I remembered the door, the one I had glimpsed before the shadows had enveloped me, a hint of light just beyond this realm. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through me, pushing back against the tide of darkness. I focused on that flicker of salvation, directing all my emotions, all my hopes into reaching that glimmer. Each step forward felt monumental as the shadows lashed at me like a pack of ravenous beasts, but I pressed on, feeling the warmth of Claire's essence urging me forward, even from the depths of despair. The blinding light flickered in and out of focus, teasing me, daring me to surrender to the shadows. I could see now a shape forming an archway, not just of light, but of something more organic, alive. Tendrils writhed from its edges, beckoning to me with soothing whispers. "Step away from the turmoil, little one, escape your fate, join us in eternal slumber." No. My voice tore through the sanctuary of despair, an unholy scream that rumbled against the walls and stirred the shadows into a frenzy. "I won't let you take her, I won't let you take me." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the shadows began to retreat as if my defiance had ignited a spark within the gloom. But beneath the surface rage lurked a terrible malevolence. As the energy surged and roiled like a storm around me, I saw a figure, no longer just a spectator. It filled the darkness with its form, stretching impossibly long, its fingers like vines, creeping closer, staining the light with its shadow. "That I will have you both," it hissed, a promise entwined with malice. "You cannot escape what you were born into, Stephen. You will be a vessel for us all." With a deafening crack, the cavern erupted around me, fragments of the walls falling away, revealing a veritable chasm beneath a pit of gnashing teeth and malevolent eyes, a swirling vortex of lost souls clawing for the surface as darkness enveloped the very archway I sought. In that moment, I was offered a choice: a glance at the chaotic feast of spirits, distant echoes of Claire's laughter mingling with the wails of the damned. Choose us, Stephen. They cried, my name, a chilling chorus that drowned all reason. The radiant doorway glimmered, wavering, fractured by the encroaching shadows, every heartbeat an uncertain tremor marking the countdown to oblivion, and then, with one last, desperate lunge, I leaped toward the doorway, a fragment of hope buoying my desperate spirit only to feel the shadows snatch at my ankles with a strength I couldn't withstand, dragging me down into the maw of a truth I had denied for too long. Welcome home, echoed one final time, my body suspended between two realities, as I witnessed the cave erupt into furious chaos, shadows coiling and twisting around me, sealing my fate, and as the ground fell away beneath my feet, I felt the suffocating darkness closing in, waiting to reveal what horrors awaited me on the other side. And as the last shred of light flickered out, I found myself not in the depths of despair, but awakening in a new realm, a sanctuary filled with forgotten echoes and unending anxiety, realizing, with dawning terror, I was not alone. The air crackled with an electric tension, each breath a ragged reminder of the unnatural weight pressing down on my chest. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the dimness, shadows twisting in the periphery, and then clarity washed over me, revealing the surreal landscape that enveloped me. What had once been a cavern was now a vast expanse, a grotesque mirror of the world I knew, where the familiar mingled with the unrecognizable. The ground beneath was no longer solid earth but a pulsating amalgamation of slippery stone and tendrils of fog that breathed and shifted. Phantoms lingered at the edge of my vision, flickering like memories half remembered. I could hear them, whispers intertwined with the soft drip of water, echoing with haunting urgency. Find her, find us, they implored, voices layered in a dissonance that gnawed at my sanity. I forced myself to swallow the lump rising in my throat. Fear spiraled in my gut, concocting visions of Claire's fate mingled with those of the endless wailing souls. Where are you? I choked out, my voice trembling as it faded into the fog. The realization struck me like a blow. The cavern was not just a prison, it was a predator, alive with memories and desires far more sinister than I had ever imagined. Somehow, amidst the oppressive dread, I could see movement ahead, an ethereal glow that flickered like dying embers. My pulse quickened as I stumbled forward, every step threatened to pull me into the depths of despair, yet the light felt like a lifeline. Help me! I cried, reaching toward the illumination that beckoned me like a moth to a flame, but as I drew closer, the light twisted, casting dark shapes that writhed within its embrace. The glimmer began to morph into something else, less a beacon of hope and more a siren's call, luring me into a trap. Shadows peeled away from the radiance, coiling around me with insidious whispers, taunting my every desperate thought. Are you really willing to traverse the darkness again, Stephen? Can you bear to confront the truth you've locked away? The voice slithered through the air, resonating with a familiarity that both comforted and terrified me. I squinted against the glow, faint outlines solidifying, specters of the lost and forgotten, faces twisted in eternal pain, each one passing through the edge of light, as if tethered to a dark magnetism. I just want Claire. I stammered, feeling my heart pounding against my ribs, a frantic drum in a heavily echoing chamber of despair. Claire. A laugh sliced through the oppressive murmurings, echoing around me like trapped souls vying for an audience. Oh, poor child, do you not see? She is merely another vessel, just as you are destined to be. Souls must feed, they must join the chorus of the damned. Instinct screamed for me to turn back, but I couldn't move, held fast by the creeping realization that my own essence might soon be ensnared in this relentless cycle. With newfound strength, I pushed forward, the ethereal light swirling and dimming in response to my determination. Then, the air grew cold, drastically so. A chilling wind swept through the expanse, scattering the fog like a curtain being torn apart, and in that moment, the truth was laid bare, a sprawling landscape of souls trapped in a network of inescapable pain, each figure reaching out as though clawing for their own salvation, anchors bound together in a hell fashion from longing and despair. Stephen, came Claire's voice, fragile and haunting, cutting through the chaos like a shard of glass. My heart leaped. Help me. I fought against the tightening dread as I turned, eyes frantically searching the sea of faces until I spotted her light illuminating her form, but the shadows gnawed at her edges, a constant gnawing of despair. Claire! I yelled, reaching out even as the cavern beneath us trembled unnervingly, as if anticipating a dreadful conclusion to my resolve. But the shadows murmured, they seemed to manifest from the depths, growing, thickening around me, invigorated by my emotion. "Stay with us, Stephen," they hissed, "join her eternal suffering. You were never meant to rise above it." That I trembled as their forms started to warp, elongating into grotesque shapes. Desperation clawed at my throat as I felt the phantom hands of my forgotten past reach for me, drawing nearer, dragging me back toward the darkness I had once thought I could escape. "Choose wisely," the shadows whispered, a chorus of despair twisting around me as Claire's essence shimmered brighter, desperately seeking my salvation amidst the gloom. "For one can live, while the other must perish." As my resolve faltered, I found myself ensnared in a twisted moment of clarity, the ground quaking violently beneath me, tearing away at the boundaries between salvation and damnation. I could feel the fissures forming, ruptures birthed from my indecision, and panic flooded my veins, and then, in that moment of pure chaos, the ethereal light shattered around me, fracturing into a kaleidoscope of haunting cries. Reality warped, pulling apart at the seams as I was forced to face the ultimate choice, with the howls of the damned echoing in my ears, threatening to swallow me whole. The scream of 100 lost souls filled the cavern in fervent crescendo, and as I was thrown backward into the dark, I could see Claire slip from my grasp, her figure retreating into the gathering shadows, calling my name one last time with an urgency I could no longer ignore. That I was left with a decision that would either seal our fates or grant me my freedom. But in that critical instant, the darkness rushed in to embrace me, and I was yanked into a void where reality thinned until I could no longer tell where my soul began and the shadows ended, the threshold of a choice that trembled under the weight of impending doom. And then, just as the abyss consumed my vision entirely, a chilling laugh echoed within the void, one that I recognized all too well, coursing through me like ice. The darkness had found me again, but this time, it offered a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to know. It took time to understand the wretched truth. I had slipped through a veil, a thin membrane separating reality from an endless, hungry dark. The cave of whispers was not a mere cave, but a living entity. It thrived on despair, an insatiable appetite that feasted on the souls of the lost. And somehow, I had unwittingly become another piece in its grotesque puzzle, all while chasing shadows in pursuit of Claire. Despair was a disease, and I had been infected. I found her again, flickering at the periphery of this dark realm, glowing intermittently against the inky backdrop. But it was not just her face I saw, it was a reflection of myself, a mirror of weakened resolve and tormented cries that echoed through this living nightmare. "Help me," she beckoned, her voice quivering with anguish. "Please, I'm still here," but the shadows responded with maddening whispers, mingling with Claire's cry, their laughter enveloping me like chains tightening around my heart. "Join us," they sang, their mirth a twisted parody of friendship, mirroring the same laughter we had once shared, filled with warmth and happiness. Dozens of faces emerged, each contorted in pain yet bizarrely familiar, coaxing me down the rabbit hole of despair. "You want her. You want her back. To save one, another must fall into the dark." As the shadows swelled, I felt Claire's warmth wavering, teetering on the edge of oblivion. My heart raced anew, fueled by a tempest of emotions. "No!" I shouted into the maw of darkness, defiance roaring within me. "Not again. I won't choose," but the truth clenched at my throat, a bitter pill impossible to swallow. Claire was not merely lost, she was evolving, merging with the darkness, becoming their echo. Every moment I lingered in the gloom pulled her deeper into the cycle of despair, and I was the puppet, our fates intertwined forever in this grotesque dance. "Join us, eternities spent together," they taunted, the shadows materializing into figures I recognized, each one tethered to every secret fear I clung to throughout my life. "You've always sought belonging. We are home." Sudden clarity struck. Meth Cave's whispers carried the weight of choices I had made long before the adventure began. I realized those seeking solace among the shadows, those who had vanished within the caves, were not merely wanderers, they were reflections of trauma, echoes of unspoken misery I had also shared. Their loss was my loss. As the truth coursed through me, the shadows fluctuated, warping as I fought against their grasp. "Let her go." I surged forward, desperation mixed with purpose, but the darkness coiled tighter, tendrils crawling along my skin, wrapping around my mind like iron shackles, exerting pressure upon my thoughts. "You can't win against us, Stephen," a voice wheezed, indignant yet seductive. "You belong in the shadows." "You always have," it echoed within me, a reminder mingled with the heaviest truths, the loneliness that led me here, the sorrow that made me an easy target. "We're home." The shadows roared, and all at once, a wave of memories crashed over me like a tempest as the cavern convulsed first rage, and then despair, creating a cacophony of fragmented emotions. I was not merely battling for Claire, I was battling my very nature, spiraling into the depth of my own insecurities. With newfound strength, I tore myself from the shadows, the crushing weight of despair giving way to a flicker of hope. My vision sharpened, unveiling the altar of collective anguish before me. "You are nothing," I hollered, and they recoiled, the whispering chorus fading for just a moment. "Tie yourself to them," the darkness hissed, desperate, thrumming with indignation that both frightened and propelled me. My heart thundered in my chest as I thrust my hands into the shadows. "No more!" I screamed, summoning every ounce of willpower, battling the intransigent web entangling me. We broke bread beneath the sun, we laughed till nightfall. There is light. In a moment of sheer determination, I rejected the dark voice claiming my fate. I pulled at every tether that bound me to the shadows, realizing that each lost soul before me was more than a memory. They were shadows of my own making. They had lived in the caverns of my mind. The darkness rumbled, snarling, weaving a web around my essence in a terrible embrace, but I had the strength of those who suffered before me, the echoes of their hopes resonating through my soul. "No. I am not lost." The words slashed through the darkness, spinning energy that gusted forth like a beacon, shining against the inky black. I burst free from doubt, and with it, I felt the hold of shadows loosening. The gloom writhed, anguished by the escape of another soul wishing to break free. Suddenly, Claire was no longer a flicker of light but a vibrant presence before me. The shadowy figures recoiled, twisting back into the abyss that had once sought to consume me. "Stephen. They're not your home. You remember who you are." In that moment, I recognized the choices I had made, the things I had allowed to tie me. Love, the warmth, the brightness, it was real. It coursed through my veins, intertwining with anger, fear, and finally, clarity. I understood what I needed to do, that I am not broken. I declared, and neither are you. My voice thundered, the very walls vibrating with the power of conviction anchoring me. I reached for her, the shadowy tendrils snapping and tearing as I ran forward, my spirit erupting forth, blazing defiance like a fire illuminating the dark. "Join us," they wailed one last time, a final desperate attempt to snatch what remained. The fabric of reality warped as the cavern trembled, fracturing beneath the pressure of unwilling souls. The echoes of others resonated, and at last, my heart swelled, would not be their catalyst, together. I screamed, my hands snapping around Claire's, feeling the warmth radiate fiercely, overpowering the encroaching void. "We are more than this." As our energies collided, the light bursting brighter than the shadows could withstand, the cavern howled, shaking violently as souls reached out in anguish, grasping at the fragile beauty radiating from our connection. With a primal roar, I pulled Claire away from the shadows. The cavern detonated, shadows twisting, reshaping, imploding as we transcended the utter engulfment of darkness, and then there was silence that in an instant, I spiraled through a tunnel of light. Clarity rushed back into my body, the shadows distantly shrieking as the darkness folded in on itself. I blinked, gasping as I emerged into the world, no longer the stifling grip of despair surrounding me. Distant trees swayed beneath the soft glow of twilight, the sky dappled in hues of violet and amber. But as I stood there, heart racing, I glanced beside me, searching for Claire. "Where are you?" I called, and in a moment of eerie calm, the surrounding serenity was broken once again. A weight settled over me, a chilling doubt creeping back. "You escaped the dark, yet what if it merely lingered?" A voice whispered, serpentine, echoing through the winds like a laugh I recognized all too well. Before me, the shadows began to shift, ominous whispers trailing in their wake. "This isn't the end, not yet." As a shiver raced up my spine, Claire's face flickered in and out of view, echoing not just my survival but a hidden truth: the darkness, ever present, still hungered. My breath quaked in realization. We had broken the cycle, but the cavern still remained. A part of me would always linger on the edge, tethered to the shadows. And as I stood amidst the fading light of day, I understood with a bone-deep certainty: the Cave of Whispers was not just a place, it had etched, it would entwine, it would echo on forever within me. Welcome home, it sang, the shadows intertwining with the fading light, a haunting reminder that the darkness was waiting for me to listen.